Assassin's Creed Shadows is finally here, and I have been playing the hell out of it. As a longtime Assassin's Creed fan, this game was already high on my list of titles I was most excited for this year, but I've been surprised to find that it's actually managed to surpass the lofty expectations that I've set for it. This game is fantastic, but also maybe a little bit too familiar to stand substantially above other recent titles in the series. So in this video, I want to talk about all of it. The good, the bad, but mostly the good, because like I said, I really do love this game. Before I get into that though, my usual reminder, if you enjoy this content, please be sure to give it a like and hit that subscribe button down in the corner. I'm on the doorstep of 500 subs, and I appreciate any and all help in hitting that milestone. Now with all that being said, let's get into today's video. Assassin's Creed Shadows is fantastic, but it isn't perfect. I have a couple of main gripes, and while they haven't hindered my enjoyment of the game substantially, I do feel obligated to bring them up before I spend the rest of this video singing this game's praises. For starters, there are a few areas of Shadows that feel a bit unpolished compared to what I've come to expect from this series. This is most apparent in the game's voice acting. It can be a bit rough. Certain characters are mostly fine. I found the voice actor who plays Yasuke delivers a fairly strong performance throughout the entirety of the game, but others, not so much. The performance of the other lead, who plays Naoe, is substantially shakier. There are stretches where it's fine, but certain lines are awkwardly delivered with questionable inflection, and some pretty silly dialogue in some spots. This is disappointing because I like Naoe's character a lot, and I feel like for the most part she is well written, so the shaky performance can be a bit distracting. It's not a problem confined to just her though, as I found multiple other characters give similarly spotty performances throughout the game. Again, none of these performances are outright bad or egregious or anything like that, but Assassin's Creed has typically been a series with the best of the best production values throughout its history, and it does feel like maybe Ubisoft thought it could save a little money by skimping on the voice acting this time around. The other area of the game that felt a bit rough to me in spots is its traversal. For as beautiful and striking as Shadow's world is, and trust me, I'm going to talk a lot about that in a bit, certain aspects of the exploration of it can feel lacking. When you're out in the wilderness, there are certain main roads that are optimal for getting around. However, you're always able to break from those roads, of course, and run up hills or through trees to try to get to your destination faster, but oftentimes doing this feels awful. The game clearly wants you to stick to the more established roads, as breaking from the main path can lead to your character glitching out and becoming kind of unresponsive. Getting stuck in the landscape's foliage and watching Naoe clip around until her character model finds a less dense area to land looks like something you'd see in a AA game, not the newest blockbuster title in the Assassin's Creed franchise. Similarly, the horse in this game feels pretty bad to control. Like I thought we had just kind of mastered horse controls at this point in gaming history, but Assassin's Creed Shadows feels like it set horse controls back an entire generation. The horse will sometimes take forever to show up when you call for it, and when it finally does get there, it's slow and unresponsive to control. The horse feels bad enough that I found myself often just running to my destination, unless it was a crazy long distance away. Fortunately, Naoe is pretty light on her feet and moves fairly quickly, so this isn't quite as bad of an option as it sounds, but this is still kind of a bummer. And of course, on the topic of traversal, this isn't a new complaint, but parkour continues to be extremely subpar when compared to earlier games in this series. This is an issue that started when Assassin's Creed switched to this RPG formula, so like I said, this is nothing new, but man, it feels like parkour is more of an afterthought than ever in Shadows. Naoe can still scale buildings and walls and run from rooftop to rooftop, but there are significantly less parkour options than before, and it all just feels so much clunkier than it used to. There are also way too many walls in this game that look scalable, only for Naoe to bounce off of them unsuccessfully when you try to do so. I'm willing to overlook this when the game has so many other great things to offer, but it's kind of sad when you think about how far the series has fallen from its early days of featuring the best parkour that we had ever seen in gaming. But alright, that's enough of the negativity. Those are all legitimate complaints, sure, but to be honest, none of them have really hindered my enjoyment of this game. Assassin's Creed Shadows is phenomenal, there are a ton of good things to discuss here, so let's get into all the good. The obvious starting point here is the game's world. This might sound like I'm exaggerating, but I honestly think Assassin's Creed Shadows is the best looking video game I've ever played. My capture setup is less than ideal, so obviously the footage here isn't going to come close to doing it justice, but playing Shadows on my PS5 Pro has been maybe the first time in the entire PS5 lifespan that I have felt like I'm truly playing something next gen. Walking through the Japan wilderness in the sunlight is stunning. The lighting effects are unmatched, the colors pop, and everything feels astonishingly alive. I think technologically speaking, that might be the most impressive thing about this game. The way that the wind swirls and the leaves move around you as you play makes it feel like you are truly in a living, breathing world. In that same vein, the way that the game incorporates its seasons mechanic is one of the coolest things I've seen in an open world game. The world goes through all 4 seasons as you play. Spring and summer are my favorites, as I believe they're the best showcases for the beauty of this game. Nothing compares to traversing across the land as the bright colors of a spring day flood your screen, but I found myself to come to love the muted colors and quiet serenity of winter as well. Witnessing the landscape, the sky, and the wildlife all change as the seasons progress is beautiful, and fortunately, all of them are gorgeous in their own way. In fact, I think this is the first game of the entire generation where, given the choice between quality and performance mode, I actually picked quality. Normally, I will never play on 30 FPS if given the option to have 60 frames, but the quality mode on display here is fantastic. Being able to see the full beauty of the world and all of its potential is worth it, and I found the 30 FPS to be impressively smooth. I'm no expert on this matter, but it feels like it has to be running at a higher frame rate than 30. It's that smooth. Truly one of the best quality modes I have ever played. Unfortunately though, I will say that this decision was kind of made for me. Anytime you go to the game's hideout area, which is essentially your home base, the frame rate locks at 30 regardless of which mode you're on. As someone who initially started on performance mode, I found having to shift back to 30 FPS anytime I went back to the hideout was pretty distracting. So I bit the bullet and decided I would just get used to the 30 frames at all times. It's disappointing that the hideout area is locked to this lesser frame rate, but I suppose it has something to do with the vast array of customization options that this area of the game provides. And trust me, there truly is an impressive amount of ways for you to make your hideout your own. And it's not simply a cosmetic thing either. There are various different buildings you can add to your hideout that provide real substantial bonuses to Naoe and Yasuke's adventure, and if you're not super interested in those bonuses, then you can ignore them and just spend your time adding a ton of adorable animal friends to your hideout instead. I'm a sucker for this sort of base building feature, so this was clearly designed for people like me, but it's still pulled off really, really well here. It's incredibly simple and intuitive to use, and once you start dabbling in it, it's hard to step away. You can tell the team really put a lot of time and love into this aspect of the game, and I'm excited to see how it continues to expand in future updates and DLC. Back to the game's visuals though, I would say that the one complaint I have in this department is Shadow's day-night cycle. The cycle is fixed where day and night both last 24 real-life minutes. A good length, in my opinion, but my complaint lies in the fact that there's no way to advance time like in previous games. I get the sense that the devs wanted players to fully experience the game's world and enjoy the beauty of all different times of day, and I get that. But like I said, I don't think I've ever seen a prettier video game scene than a summer day in Assassin's Creed Shadows, and I found myself oftentimes really wishing I could speed up the nights to get back to the glorious bright colors of the game's daytime periods. The nights in Shadows are plenty beautiful as well, but not being able to advance time feels like a strange step backwards from the previous games in the series. But the one area where Shadows absolutely dwarfs its predecessors is in the combat department. This is by far the best combat we have ever had in a game in this series. Even playing in quality mode, the combat is quick, responsive, and oh so satisfying. And the fact that there are 2 distinct playstyles with Naoe and Yasuke, and countless builds you can create with each of them, is wildly impressive. Naoe's combat style is more traditional Assassin's Creed, a heavy emphasis on speed and stealth, while Yasuke is more of a bruiser, capable of absolutely mowing down waves of enemies in incredibly brutal fashion. Early on in my playthrough, I played primarily as Naoe, as I enjoyed her more traditional Assassin's Creed feel, and playing as the slower and more lumbering Yasuke felt a bit out of place in an Assassin's Creed game initially. However, around the 20-hour mark of my playthrough, I started to really explore Yasuke's skill trees, and once I discovered his archery capabilities, I quickly fell in love with his combat style. Using an assortment of different arrows, slowing down time, and picking enemies off from afar feels tremendous and quickly became one of my favorite ways to approach combat. The two-character dynamic in general is interesting, and I found myself a bit torn on the concept. On one hand, I think it adds a cool element to the story, and being able to have two distinct playstyles that you can toggle between fairly effortlessly is pretty cool. However, there was a couple of times when I was wrapped up in playing as Yasuke, only to come to a building or wall in the game that I had to scale, essentially forcing me to switch to Naoe, as Yasuke is not able to do any sort of advanced climbing. Not a huge deal in the grand scheme of things, as you can switch characters with just a button in the menu and then enduring a fairly brief loading screen, but sometimes it does feel like a bit of a momentum killer. After a while, I found myself wishing I could just merge the two characters into one super assassin, giving me the mobility capabilities of Naoe with the combat options of Yasuke. But like I said, I do think the two-character dynamic is good for the story, and Naoe and Yasuke do have a likable, natural chemistry with one another. And speaking of the story, I've been enjoying it quite a bit. It's a fairly by-the-numbers revenge story, and I really do wish these games would lean more into the animus wackiness of the earlier games, but the story is still pulling me along, and I'm eager to see what happens next. I think I'm around the halfway point of the main arc, and I haven't lost interest yet, and considering I have an embarrassingly short attention span these days, that's a pretty good reflection of the game. Anyway, I think the bottom line comes down to this. The Assassin's Creed franchise is not for everyone, and if you haven't been a fan of recent games in the series, then I don't think Shadows will change your mind. It's every bit as formulaic as Valhalla or Odyssey, and it can certainly get a bit repetitive the longer you play. But, if you are like me and love the Assassin's Creed formula, then I cannot recommend Shadows enough. I've always compared Assassin's Creed to video game comfort food, and Shadows feels like the best, most delicious version of that. Let me know what you think in the comments below though. Are you a mark for the Assassin's Creed formula like I am, or have these games long gone stale for you? I'd love to hear your thoughts on Shadows and the Assassin's Creed franchise in general. And as always, thanks for watching.